Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we are talking about fan fiction history. We've been diving into people's memories of how fandom and fan fiction came together, especially in the supernatural realm, and looking to make sure that we preserve that narrative because it's an important part of our fandom culture. But before we dive into that, let's let our wonderful panelists tell us about themselves, starting with Dime.
Hi, I am Dimeliora, or Dime is what it's come down to. I started writing fan fiction in Harry Potter, and then in season 2 or 3 of me catching up on Supernatural, I tried writing a Gen fic, and then I read my first not Gen fic, and that changed the trajectory of the rest of my life. So my fandom has been heavily influenced by that and by the people that tricked me into it. So
Okay, Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue. I write as Candygramme, and I've been writing fanfic for something like 25 years now. I was with Supernatural from the start, wrote my first Supernatural fanfic in the end of 2005, and it's been a steady stream since then. But
Okay.
I started a long time ago with moonlighting, would you believe?
Yes, I can. Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I write under the name Firesign 10. I started writing fanfic in 2012 and am writing to this day. In fact, I'm posting a story this week.
Me too.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male romance, paranormal male romance. But all my worlds are ones where Sam and Dean could walk in and feel right at home. I don't write fan fiction now, except for some flash fiction for the Winchester family business, but I started out and got my chops learning to write for all the fandoms I was part of back in high school and college and graduate school. And of course, this was pre-internet, so none of that's on AO3. And it will probably never see the light of day out of my file cabinet. But back in the day, I absolutely enjoyed it and learned how to write from doing fanfic. And I'm still a huge consumer reading fanfic and a big fan of everybody who's here. So pardon me while I fangirl because I love all your stuff. Now, you guys have already answered one of my questions, which is what were some of your first fandoms? But maybe let's go into that a little more from the idea of what made you go from being a fan of something to want to write about it and kind of bring your own, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this happened to the fandom? Sue?
Well, with Supernatural, certainly the thing that motivated me was the fact that it was obvious that Sam and Dean loved each other, but they were never going to be put together on the show. So I had to do it for them.
You're very considerate like that.
Yeah.
We appreciate your sacrifice.
They never thanked me.
Carole?
I had never really written fanfic before. I mean, I was an early fan of shows like Dark Shadows, the original Star Trek, all of this kind of thing. And I had friends who were reading yaoi, which is your boy manga. And from there, I started reading Stargate Atlantis fanfic. And then when I started watching Supernatural, we had the unexpected hiatus, elongated hiatus of season 3 because of the writer's strike. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? It's going to be months before it comes back. And I thought, I wonder if there's Supernatural fanfic. And of course there was scabs of it. And I dived right into the slash and just never stopped. And at one point, finally, I mean, it took a few years, but I've always enjoyed writing. I've never written a lot, but I really enjoy it, and I've been in creative writing groups, like LiveJournal and stuff. And I finally was like, I need to do this. I have stories to tell, and I just started doing it.
I got into writing for the fandoms that I was in love with back in high school and college, which were things like Space 1999 and the New Avengers and some of those, because the shows got canceled and there weren't more episodes. And so my friends came to me and said, well, you're pretty good with words, write us something.
Mhm.
And so I wrote out of the lack of new material. And that's how I discovered that I could entertain people with my writing. And then The Empire Strikes Back came out, and there was going to be several years before we got the next movie. And of course, it ends on a cliffhanger. Han is in carbonite. Leah's been carried off. We don't, Luke lost his hand. Everything is falling apart. And my friend said, well, we don't want to wait 3 years. You write it. So that's where I learned that I could write a book length story that entertained people. And so I wrote my version of what was going to come after The Empire Strikes Back. And to this day, there are 6 people in this world who like it better than George Lucas's. 6. I'm just saying, I'm proud of that. But it taught me that I could entertain people, and that kind of went on to change the rest of my life. With Supernatural, I got in late. I fell in love with it halfway through season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months so I could be ready to live tweet at the beginning of season 12. And after I finished the episodes, it was like, well, it's on hiatus. What am I going to do? And when I had never really, I knew AO3 was out there. I had never really spent much time out there. I thought, I wonder what this fan fiction is like. And down the rabbit hole, and it once again changed my life in many ways. So yes, that's kind of how I got to it. Dime.
It was Daddy's Blunt Little Instrument. When Dean said that line, I immediately turned to the person next to me and said, this is going to be a tragedy, like just a pure tragedy. So I wanted to do something that would not be a pure tragedy, which is why I dipped my toe into Jen. And then I watched the fan fiction episode, and I decided I needed to find out what that was about. And so I looked in, and the first fic was also the one that brought me in completely to the fold. And it was Road Rhythms, Easy to Fool When You Were in School. And by the end of that, I was like, oh yeah, I ship this. This is it. I'm in. So I made a new name. She's amazing. She's an incredible writer.
Yeah.
Now, what changes have you seen in fanfic, in the fan fiction community, in how fan fiction's shared in the platforms since you've been involved as a reader and or a writer? Sue?
Back when I started reading, especially in Supernatural, a lot of it was RPS, and it was not alternative universe, it was RPS about Jensen and Jared. My guess is because, as Dime says, it was a tragedy, and it was obviously always going to be a tragedy, whereas you could be playful with the RPS. And I think RPS had always been frowned upon until Supernatural came along. And I've noticed that first all the J2 stuff went alternate universe, and gradually it's fading away. And although Sam and Dean are still being written about sporadically, that too is fading. And maybe because the show's over, maybe because there is a move afoot to ban or Wincest or what have you. But I think that's very sad.
Well, and just to define a couple terms here, RPF means real people fiction.
Sorry, yeah.
And gen means not romantically connected. And then of course slash is romantically connected, usually used to indicate male-male romance.
Mhm.
Carol, how about you?
I still feel that the fan fiction realm is doing, is pretty energetic. It may not be as energetic as it was maybe in the heyday, but there are still many events. There's still a lot of writing happening. There's a certain amount, and I don't want to get into like the division of ships, but
Mm,
there's a certain division happened at one point during the course of the show, and that did kind of split not just the fandom, but the direction of the fanfics.
yeah.
So I think primarily the writers you have here are the Sam and Dean writers, and RPF writers. And that's kind of in a different world than the other major ship that one sees in Supernatural. I mean, I certainly, all of us are still active writers. And it's, there are still new events starting, and some events have faded, but other ones, come to being. And I think one of the best things for the continuation of it is that Supernatural is streaming. You have people watching who weren't alive when the show started. So, or people who maybe saw some of it and then, weren't able to keep going. And then they're like, oh, it's there. And so you have people rewatching it. You have people watching it for the first time. Recently at one of the cons, and Jared and Jensen were talking with a young woman who was 15 or 16 years old. And they were like, she was born when Supernatural started. So I think compared to some fandoms where the show has ended a long time ago, there's really a lot of vitality still there. Perhaps, like I say, not quite as energetic as it used to be, but considering the age of the show and that the show ended, a couple of years ago now, it's still a lot of creating going on, and a lot of people, coming across it for the first time, and people writing for the first time. Of course, now we have so many more platforms, and so that's a diffusing thing too, because if you're primarily writing on Twitter and AO3, you may not be aware of Tumblr writers, and Tumblr writers may not be aware of the Twitter writers, and nobody's aware of the LJ writers, and all of that. So it sometimes it's a little sectioned off, and you have to find the common ground, which turns out mostly to be AO3.
Yeah. And like Carol said, we don't dive into the ship wars or all of that here because we try to stay Switzerland. But I got into writing fan fiction in the dark ages before there was a public internet and computers. So we had fanzines, which were photocopied or mimeographed collections of stories that would be, you'd happen upon one, or you'd find an ad for one in the back of something and you'd write away for it. And they were all not professional, but they were made with love, and you'd get some new content. And I knew people who, when computers did become more common, got into writing on some of the bulletin boards and some of the message trees that people could put it out there, but it's still very hard to find or search. And so for me, finding things like AO3 that is reasonably well searchable and has so much right there, and you can go through and narrow down to make it easier to find what you want, is just a godsend, because I've waded through the other stuff and I've been there and done that. And I think that seeing the fandom come to that level of professionalism with AO3, with all the tagging and with the beta reading and the you know, how well crafted the stories are and how carefully they're put out there. And you know, that's a real evolution from when we would just type something up and or sometimes handwrite it and send it off to our buddies and go, hey, what do you think? I've read my share of handwritten fan fiction back in the day. So even with as difficult to navigate for us newbies as LJ is, it still beats handwritten. So I'll take it. And I'm glad to see that evolution. And Carole, I think you're right. You know, every time I just go out and search on supernatural fan fiction, there are pages and pages of new entries. So it's certainly still being written, and there are still big bang events out there and themed events. So I hope it lasts forever. It's doing pretty well. And of course, we've got all these new shows like Big Sky and The Boys and Walker that have brought new people to recognize Jared and Jensen and go, hey, these guys were in something before this. Let's go check it out. And then they find Supernatural on streaming, and then they go down the rabbit hole, and we welcome them into the fold. Dime?
I think with Supernatural, there's a very special kind of thing, especially like when I compare it to the Harry Potter fandom. With Supernatural, it's based off of found family. So I think the longer I've found that the show goes, the tighter the relationships I have with the people who maybe stopped writing or continue to write. So I don't know if we've lost some good ones. We have definitely lost some good ones in the last couple of years. But I think that there is still, I think it is impossible for us to escape at this point. We sort of built our lives around it. We made best friends in it, sisters from another mother, brothers from another mother. Like, we all made a found family with Sam and Dean, and now we're just screwed. So I think it will continue on. I don't know if it'll grow, but I think it will continue on. People will replace each other. And in the meantime, we'll just hopefully stay friends.
Mm-hmm. What, why do you write fan fiction? What does it do for you? What do you enjoy about it? And how, if it has, how has that changed over the years you've been writing it? Carole?
Gosh, so many things. At a very basic level, it satisfies my creative urges. I've always had to create. I've always been a creative person. At various points, it was music. It was different kinds of like crafting, you know, sewing and embroidery and all kinds of things like that. But the love of language is something I've had since childhood. And I wrote my first little story about a prince who wore this royal purple doublet with slashed yellow sleeves. You know? Or the woman whose skin turned invisible. So I've always enjoyed that. I've always loved that. I adore language. And so it kind of really came together for me because here were characters I felt very deeply about, and I could express myself through them, but also to explore more about them. What are different facets of these characters that perhaps we don't see? What are, I explained this one time where it's, even if you take something from canon and you have all these scenes, but if you put your finger on one scene just to kind of blow it up, you can have a whole story in there. You know, as you magnify everything around that one scene, like you're zooming in on it, there's stuff that can happen, or, you know, gaps between things that you can extrapolate your own stories from. There's always new case fics you can write. I love case fics. There's different facets of their relationships. whether it's, with each other or with others in the world, whatever. There's always new things to explore. And that's all within just the supernatural verse itself. But that's not even getting into real person fic, which is, there is no limit, because AUs or alternate universes are anything you want to think about. If you want to write a story about mermaid people, go for it. If you want to write Jared and Jensen is space hopping, brigadoons or something, you can write anything. But
I read
even
that.
in the canon world, there's so much to explore and think about and delve into. And that's all tremendously satisfying. It's interesting, it's fun. There are fluffy stories, there are intense stories. If you feel like angst, or you feel like just something to lift your mood, or you want something a little zesty. There's all kinds of different things out there to read and to write, and I enjoy both tremendously.
Well, and I think you've really kind of hit on something there, Carol, because anytime you're creating a book or a TV show or a movie, there are limits in that outside world of how many pages, how long it has to be, how long a script can be. And so you cut out everything that isn't super essential to the plot. But there are so many times we know that when the scene changed, there's going to be a conversation after what happened. They were going to talk in the Impala or in the diner, or there was something to be settled. And fan fiction lets us imagine what that conversation was like, or it lets us fix things when the official writers went off and forgot something, or maybe like had never watched the show and got things wrong. And it lets us, or lets us give alternatives. Didn't like the finale? Fine. Here are 50,000 other versions. You're going to like one of them better. Or take that road not traveled. The story that was hinted on, well, what if Charlie had stayed in Oz with Dorothy and hadn't, nobody had gotten killed? All of those things are possible with fan fiction. I think that's one of the things as a reader that I love about it is it's boundless. It is limited only by imagination, and you can find whatever flavor of it you want, and in any length or permutation, and it's all there. And that's just such a wonderful gift within the fandom. Dime.
Oh boy. Initially I did it because it wouldn't get out of my head unless I wrote it down. But I am very much like a cat in a number of different ways. The largest one being, when I like somebody, I will drag the corpse of whatever I can catch and bring it back to them and leave it there. So at this point, I think the majority of what I write is just small animals I'm killing and dragging to my friends, specifically built for them. It's really, there's an inherent challenge in fan fiction, a kind of quest to gain control over a world, to be able to bend it to your will, and then people are either approving of the logic and structure of it or not. But it really gives you a way to sort of relieve stress, to let that venting steam come off. So I've written gifts for friends that are essay survivors, and they want something that's a little dark but has like a hopeful ending, and it gives them this very therapeutic, cathartic sense of knowing that there's something beyond that first step of trauma. And so that has been, of all the things I've written, those are my favorite stories, because I killed a bigger animal and dragged it home to my friend. So that would be why.
That makes sense. Sue.
Well, for me, a lot of it is the fact that with fanfic, there's no pressure. You don't have to. The only pressure that there is comes from inside of me, because I got to be writing. A lot of what I write is lampooning things. I write a lot of humorous stuff, or at least I hope it's humorous. But I have done all kinds of stuff, and I just have to be writing. But if somebody wants me to write something specific for them, there's pressure and it's hard, and I don't find it easy. So it's free flow. I just let it fall out and end up on the page. And there it is for people to read or not read. And I think that's important too. I don't write for anybody except for me. And I do it to get rid of it and move on to something else that's pushing me.
What would you tell somebody who is tentatively dipping their toe into the vast ocean of supernatural fanfic in terms of what to expect, how to navigate, what to do, what not to do? And has any of that etiquette changed over the years? Dime?
Oh my. So I have a friend who is a fellow writer who has a really the only word would be just death grudge against tags. Absolutely cannot stand tags. And she has written things that are so audacious, just so she can mark author will not tag on them. And I think that is both the first thing that you should know about fandom, which is how to use and utilize tags. And then the second thing I would say is ignore the crap out of them. Like, the etiquette's important and I will do it every single time. But I have delved into stories that had tags that made me want to go nowhere near them. And I have loved them. And that author wrote something that she did not tag that had major character death, a thing that's typically a big no-no for me. And I was weeping, just weeping when I got to the end of it. But I got to go on that journey and my God, it moved me. So yeah, that would be it. Learn how to use tags and then just ignore the crap out of them.
Sue.
Well, we just had in one of our chats, we just had a youngster who was looking for a way of starting. And my thoughts are always, first of all, find somebody to bounce ideas off. And secondly, just to do it. You're not a writer until you write something. And once you write something, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, or if it makes sense or not, it's a start. And there are lots of resources for writers. I think it maybe hasn't changed that much through the years. And back in the day, we used to have a gay guy come and tell us all about gay sex just so that we got it right. And he's no longer with us, but there are other places where you can get that information. There's all kinds of resources for writers online, some of them very erudite and some of them not so much. So really, if you're going to dip your toe in, dip it. Make sure and get it wet. Make sure that you fall in, because once you fall in, you're never going to get out again.
Very true. Carole.
As a reader, I just kind of picked something up and started reading it. I was just like, I wasn't really picky about, I didn't get into like really kinky stuff because I had to, work my way up to it kind of thing. But just in terms of reading, stories about the characters I wanted, I just, here's the first one and kept on going. As a writer, you really just have to do it. Yeah, you really just have to say, I'm going to write this and go with what your idea is. I remember being terribly excited, writing my first couple of stories. Not that I don't get excited now, but I'm kind of used to it. Whereas in the very beginning, it was like, oh my goodness, I'm doing this. And then casting it out onto the waters and waiting to see what kind of reactions you get. I just feel now I'm just a little more measured because it's a process now I'm used to, and I know I know a little more what I'm doing, and my writing is more experienced, and all of that. But you're still, every story is still a new adventure. So every story still has, how's this going to work? Oh dear, how's that going to happen? And how am I going to make this happen? And all of that. But you just have to plow ahead and keep doing it. And your first stories can suck, and that's fine. It's like anything. Did you fall off the bike a few times? Sure. So, and what did you do? You got some help and you learned how to do it. And that's what this is all about too. You have people you can ask people questions, and you can go to a writer that you admire and say, hey, could you, read this and tell me what you think, and all of that. So either way, as a reader or as a writer, it's really just about exploration. You want to explore these worlds, and exploration can be a little scary because what's out there, but if there's nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so you must just venture
Yep.
forth.
No, that's very true. And you learn so much from comments. If people come back and say, hey, kind of dragged in the middle, well, you can go back and look at it and say, yeah, I guess it kind of did. I won't do that next time. Or maybe you should start with action. Hey, that's an idea. I'll try it out with the next story. That's how you learn. That's how everybody learns. And so putting it out there and learning by doing is a great way. If you want to write stories and you've got these stories you got to get out of your head, just do it, and you'll get better as you do it. And the best way to be a better writer is to write.
Yeah.
And as a reader, just read broadly, I think, but I am one person who minds the tags, because there are things that trigger me and bother me that I really don't want to get into, or that I can handle on good days and I can't handle on bad days. So if I'm reading for comfort, I really don't want to run into, say, a surprise major character death. Carole has heard me sound off on that. So I value good tagging and honest tagging, because it's very likely to ruin the rest of my day if somebody doesn't tag and I happen upon that and I'm not in a good place to deal with that. I am the person who reads the last chapter just to make sure it's going to turn out okay before investing myself. I'll read the last chapter in books too before I buy them. They're in a bookstore. So I think know what kind of reader you are, and then be adventurous, but also recognize that some days you're going to be more adventurous than others, and those tags are there to help guide you to find something you like. Just like if you walk into a bookstore and say to the person at Barnes and Noble, I'm looking for this that has a that and then this other thing, what would you recommend? And then the bookstore, the librarian says, well, you might want to try these. The tags are sort of your guide, your librarian friend who introduces you to things.
I find that when I'm looking at tags, I don't care about, people tag for all the physical stuff. If there's sex, what kind of sex, who's a top, who's a bottom. I don't really even care about that stuff. I want to know, is it angst? Is there humor? Is it dark? I want the moody stuff. I want to know what kind of mood it is a little bit, so that if I feel like reading something really chewy and angsty, then I know I'm not going to pick up something that's really a fluffy PWP, a porn without plot. That's a different mood. And then some nights I'm like, oh, I just want fluff. I want tooth-rotting sweetness. Then I'm not going to pick up the angsty thing. So that's the kind of tags I look for as a reader, and that I try to tag for. People will be like, well, who's the top? I don't care. And people have their preference, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'm not criticizing that if they have their preference. However, when I'm looking for, and what I do is I'm like, is it amusing? Is it humorous? Is it dark? One of the best tags out there is Dead Dog Do Not Eat. In which the tag has said something that this is not for the faint of heart, and should you go forward, you have been forewarned. And so there are times where I'm like, I go ahead and I read it. And it might be, like Dime said, it might be something absolutely fabulous, and delicious. And other times I'm like, well, they told me, it's on me. I'm not going to criticize them because they warned me that this might not be your cup of tea.
Well, the other one that makes me pause is author chose not to use archive warnings. That usually tells me they're going to pull something on me somewhere in here. And if I'm not in the mood to deal with that well, I'll probably skip it unless it's coming on a recommendation from someone who can say, no, that thing you're worrying about doesn't happen. This other thing happened. That's fine. Or I'll read the last couple chapters to make sure it goes the way I want it to go. I am not a person who minds spoilers, but that one does make me pause and go, what is it they want to spring on me, and am I going to like it? And so that's just something to understand. If you see that somebody's trying not to give away a major plot point, but you may want to know that that major plot point is infidelity or breakup or major physical injury or death, proceed with caution. What about those big bangs and the challenges and the themed story writing out there? Right now it's November when we're cutting this, and NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, is the big thing with a lot of folks, but it's kind of always NaNoWriMo in fanfic. But we have all those wonderful themed challenges. For the folks who are just getting their feet wet with this, what's all that about? Anybody chime in?
So my first big bang, I ended up with the most incredible artist, just like wonderful, wonderful artist. And she introduced me to 2 other writers who then introduced me to more writers. So the community aspect of big bangs is great. You get to work really closely with another person who loves the same kind of things as you. The challenge of the big bang is great because it gives you a deadline, it gives you a thing to hit, a victory to have. But if for me, the biggest positive is just I love art. Like, I just love when people make art for my dumb stories. So I'll do every big bang they throw at me.
Well, and just again to back up and maybe explain, big bangs are themed challenges where it might be a monster big bang or an eldritch big bang or a general big bang where there's an art pairing and an author. And I'm sure someone else can describe that better, but it's one where, you're going to come away with a whole bunch of stories that kind of are on this theme. And that can be a treasure trove when you find it. Carol, can you explain that better than I did? Because I don't write them.
So challenges overall, and challenges and bangs, usually have parameters. So the jewel in the crown is the supernatural J2 big bang that you have all spring to work on and then posts through the summer. And the reason it's a big bang is because the minimum word count is 20,000 words. So people have to write something over 20,000 words, and they can go up to, I've seen big bangs be like 80,000, 90,000, 100,000 words. And at some point, yes, then you get paired with an artist who makes some art pieces for your story, which is always super fun and delightful. Like Dime said, to see art for your story, you're like, ooh. Some bangs are on a specific theme. So you mentioned the Eldritch bangs. So those are always Sam and Dean stories, and it's all about the spooky, so it's often like a case fic or something, and it's all about, something spooky. There was a great one, and I think it's still around, the Harlequin Challenge, where it was all these Harlequin novel plots, and then you revamped them as, J2 or Sam and Dean or something like that. And that's hilarious because you get all these different kinds of rom-coms and everything. There's
another one like that too, isn't it? Where it takes movies and redoes.
The SPN Cinema Challenge, where you take a movie and you revamp it. And so those things are always really thought-provoking and they're fun, and you're like, oh, I've written a couple of my really best stories, like for these kinds of events. And then there's a specific event. So for instance, that's actually starting posting, as you said, where this is recording in November. And this coming week is the first postings for the reverse bang, which is where instead of the story coming first and an artist picks it up, you have art pieces that are posted anonymously that the writers pick one and then write a story for it. So, you know, you have this kind of flip where the story is being prompted by this piece of art. And so that's really fun. And you get a whole new perspective of the stories and everything. Some things are very short. You only need 3,000 to 5,000 words. Others, like I said, the Big Bang is 20,000, might be 10,000. There's usually a deadline, whether it's that has to post in the month of May or your assigned posting date is, you know, mine is November 9th. So tomorrow, as of this recording, I'll be posting my reverse bang. So that kind of thing. And that kind of is nice because it's like, you don't have forever to kind of waffle about, you know, you're like, you have to move it along. And sometimes that's helpful, you know, because it's really easy to either let things go. And then you're like, oh man, I never finished my story. Yeah, it gives you a little something. One year, just to challenge myself, one year I did like every bang I could get my hands on, every challenge, every bang, just to push myself because each one had different emphases and different perspectives. And then just the challenge of like deadline, 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 deadline. And will I do it again? No. But it was a phenomenal year for me because I felt like I tried so many different things because of all these different kinds of challenges. So it's a really great way to say, you know, I've never written a dark fic. Wonder if I could do it, you know, or I really want to write, you know, something really sweet and romantic because maybe I write a lot of ink. So I'll do the Harlequin thing and I'll do this, you know, mistaken identity, you know, enemies to lovers or something like that. So they're really, and as Dime said, tremendous community building. A lot of these bangs will have a Discord room or a group chat or something like that. People can talk about their stories with. You meet other people. You know, you meet people who will beta for you, who will alpha for you. I have a writer friend who, you know, said until she did her first bang, she didn't know anybody. And then she did a bang, and all of a sudden she was meeting all these people, and now she has all these writer friends and artist friends because it introduced her, you know, to that world.
Okay, Sue.
Yeah. I've done Big Bang, the J2 SPN Big Bang since it was first broached, and I already started on next year because I'm slow. Say again?
Achiever.
No, I just wouldn't get it finished unless I got started. I am a really slow writer. I write it, I rewrite it, I go over it so many times. By the end of it, I'm sick of it. And I have to write linearly because if I write the ending before I get there, I won't finish it because I know how it ended. I never actually know what the ending's going to be until I'm into it. So my strategy is not other people's by any means. I think the companionship and the friendships that evolve out of the bangs are incredible. I've had artists that I didn't even know existed before do stuff for me that was so phenomenal that, you know, I've got friends for life there. And one of the whole joys of being involved in fan fiction is those relationships to me. And when you find somebody who's a really, really amazing enabler, you don't want to let them go.
This is true.
Yeah.
Well, we have gone through our time. Imagine that. But before we wrap up, please let everybody know where they can find your work online. And starting with Dime.
The majority of what I have written is now on AO3. So Archive of Our Own, and it's under the name right there, Dimeliora. I do have a Twitter account, but it is under a different name, known as Strega, because my handle's taken literally everywhere but a live journal in AO3. So that would be the two best places.
Okay, so
Okay, I write as Candygramme, as I said before, and I'm also on AO3, so pretty much everything that's been published is on AO3. I'm in the process of going through stuff that I've never posted anywhere before and just heaving it up online. So over the last few weeks, I think I've added about 30 new stories, and there are still more to come because I'm kind of mean with what I share. And it suddenly occurred to me that, if my hard drive died, they'd all be gone. So they're going up.
very, very nice. Carol.
You can find me on Facebook, especially in Continual, and in the Facebook group that Gail runs, which is Team Free Will North Carolina, TFWNC. On Twitter, I am true_firesign10. All of my fic is on AO3 under firesign10, and mind the tags.
I lurk for many, many hours on AO3. I am a staff columnist and sometimes flash fiction author on the Winchester Family Business. And I do run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook. I am easy to find for the non-fandom stuff at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. I'm on all the social media under those names. So if you can spell them right, you'll find me there. But mostly I'm here on Continual. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up. So we'll see you online.